It's indeed a pleasure. Thank you for inviting me. It's an honor to speak with privacy and security professionals, and it's also during this time. It's such a honor to connect with people across the globe through mediums and channels like this. So thank you for inviting me. And today I'll be touching upon how you can bootstrap privacy applications on blockchain. Whatever I've learned over the last couple of years is it's just I'm trying to unpack all my learning and share it with you, and that will lead to probably more opportunities to see how we can actually build privacy focused applications, and in turn it will help people uh, in using primarily very respectful apps for them in their day-to-day lives. And who am I? My name is Wilson. I'm the maker of BlockSurvey, one of the makers. We are a team of five, and also I'm an evangelist with Blockstack blockchain, and that's my email and Twitter. I'll share the presentation at the end. I'll give the link to the presentation. So in this agenda, I wanted to touch upon why we have to look into blockchain and what is the era we are in today, and understanding a little bit of the fundamentals or the foundations of blockchain, and then after understanding blockchain, then we'll look into how we can bootstrap privacy focused applications on blockchain. And that's the overview of it. So let's get started. So let's look at the current era. We all know that it's highly centralized, and there is a very fine line between the physical world and the digital world, and we are more digital right now. And if you look at the digital world, the foundation is it's definitely the networks. It's primarily owned by the telephone as well as the mobile operators of the world today, and it's highly centralized. And if you there's a presentation out there on YouTube. If you read about Gotena, which is primarily mesh networks, and they speak about the utter power of centralization and what it can bring in. I think internet shutdowns, all that is very prevalent right now, and it's continuing to happen. So that's the first part. The foundation of the internet itself is centralized, and all the devices and the applications which are what we are trying to build on top of the network. In every layer, there is some amount of centralization. Could be with respect to naming services, could be with respect to the applications what we are using, highly centralized again. And our digital world is primarily centralized, and we all know that. I wouldn't go deeper to it, just a opening for it. And what are the issues what do we see? So the issues are at various levels. There is issues with access, there is issues with security breaches, and there's issues with privacy, then there's surveillance, then there is also ownership, and there's lack of ownership in every layer of interactions what we are doing in the digital world. And in this presentation, I'll be touching only upon the privacy as a key focus area, and we can dive deeper into it, how blockchain can help on the privacy space. And when you take a look at privacy today, and it's primarily is simply not there, and it's primarily because of the lack of identity and the data ownership. Do we really own our identities on the digital world today? And if you see, no one would have used the word identity so far. And if you see any applications which we are using on the digital world today, and they call it as accounts, and hardly we would use the word as identity. It's because they just give you accounts to you. They don't give you identities to you. And their accounts are primarily centralized in nature, and they are giving you access with respect to username and passwords. And it is issued by a centralized player, a tech provider, or an authority who just helps you in providing you that. And we never had an identity for ourselves on the digital world, and that is the first one which is lacking. And the data we produce using our accounts is not owned by us as well. It's because it's in their control. The data is really open, and we get to see, access, and see it, but then the data is really open at their side to see it. So I think that's where um, open data access or access rights with respect to tech enablers or tech providers or software providers, they have a serious responsibility, and that's where we see laws coming into uh, monitoring it, or primarily guidelines which helps protecting the user rights, and that is taking place. And the two key points, it's because we don't have the identity, and we don't have the ownership, and the two major key issues which is playing a huge role in the privacy, and that's what is leading to lack of privacy in any applications which we use today. So comes the decentralized era. So the next era is what we are focusing is on the decentralized era. So we saw the current era is in the current stage, and how is the decentralized era picking this over and solving these problems? So if you see the beginning of the computing era, and if you see 1960s to 70s, we have seen the mainframe era, which primarily centralized computing. You have a terminal and then you access remotely, and then you do your computing, and it's centralized. And at one remote mission, and the computing all happens. And then we moved into the desktop era, which is primarily the personal computing. All the computing happens at your own space, and the the sheer experience of just computing on your own space is interesting, and it lifted a lot of automation took place with the computing systems, but then there was no interactivity, and the seamlessness of network was not there, and it was just starting up, and then when it started up, we moved into the cloud era. So what we've seen here is from the centralized computing era, from mainframe era to the desktop era, we took back our control to our personal working space, and then with the seamlessness of connectivity, or the network availability, we moved into the cloud computing. So what we are doing is, again, we have centralized the computing in a remote space, and this era is really really problematic. So I think if you see, we don't have trust, building trust with the providers is lacking. There have been countless cases of data and trust issues, and there is tech providers, they are becoming more of a monopolies right now, and they and you would have heard it right now, even like how we call the banks to be too big to fail. I think the tech giants are becoming too big to fail as well. I think it's highly centralized, and they are walled gardens, and they are a monopoly right now, and there are no opportunities for open internet building, how people used to build internet openly, and the freedom of creation was not there in the current era. And all these problems, and we are kind of phase, and we are moving to this new era called as decentralized era, and blockchain as a foundation, as a protocol, is trying to help us. And in this era, in this decentralized era, and what we're going to see is it's truly decentralization in every layer of the internet, right from your foundation layer till your application layer and the user layer, and it is going to be decentralized. So there is not going to be data monopolies. The end members, or the people who interact with the internet, will own their identities as well as their data. And there is not going to be an account anymore. There is not going to be a username, password, auth. All that is going to be there of the past. And the apps choose to run anywhere, and it could be on their user's device, or if you wanted to use the uh, potential of decentralized computing, it is still possible. So open systems on computing on the blockchain is possible as well. So that's the beginning of the decentralized era, and we have already started it. I think with the advent of Bitcoin in 2009, and with blockchain as a potential enabler, and that foundation layer of uh, every areas of trust or security issues or the privacy issues are being taken care. and we'll move forward to see how that works. I think this is again a depiction of how we have moved from a mainframe to personal computing to cloud computing, and then eventually we are moving to decentralized computing. And just a quick understanding of the blockchain. I think what we have seen so far is the current era, and where do we want to be, and how we want it to be on the decentralized era, where we take back control of the internet. And it's primarily, we also call it as also building the next generation of web. Also, we call it as Web 3.0. And if we call today's era, the cloud computing is called as Web 2.0. I think these are just labels, but then eventually we are trying to build a far interesting, far user respecting internet. It's called as Web 3.0 or Society 3.0, and those are just labels to define what is uh, happening right now. And to understand blockchain, we know Bitcoin is the true application, right? So, application of a blockchain, have been in existence. I think many have spoken about it even in the 90s and the 80s. But the cleanest of implementation, or when it came to limelight, the purest form of implementation was Bitcoin. So, and that application is primarily to decentralize the finance, and then it came out of the financial crisis in 2008. Once it ended, then uh, a bunch of probably the hackers. Uh, we don't know who has created it, but I think it's named as Satoshi Nakamoto, but we don't know. It's still anonymous, and the network has sustained over the last 10 years right now, and it's continuing to run. And the fundamentals of that architecture is what is being used in building the next generation of applications. So we have a decentralized finance which got built using this architecture, and how about we use the similar architecture to build actually any applications which is possible on the internet, and we'll be focusing on how we can build privacy applications. So the principles are primarily trust. It's a decentralization. There will be mutual consensus. Everyone has to agree to it, and inclusiveness, openness, the way it operates, all those principles will be used, and we will look into that as well. So how I see blockchain is it's a protocol. Though there are theoretical explanation with respect to considering it as a ledger, and also or labeling it as just Bitcoin, but then the properties of this system, it should be seen as a protocol, and how we see a transport protocol today, and we have to see blockchain as a decentralized suite of protocols. Could be used for trust, could be used for bootstrapping your identities, decentralized identities, could be used for consensus as well. And it should be seen as a protocol, so that we can take this protocol and fit it into the traditional way of building things, and then you will inherit the properties of whatever the blockchain offers. It could be trust, security, and so on, privacy, and so on. And it's an interesting protocol, and we can lift certain parts of these protocols and use it for building privacy-focused applications. So I'll touch upon that as well. And we should also see it as an operating system. So where when you are interacting with an open network like public blockchains, it just provides you an operating system as well. So each one of you get a own operating system within the blockchain as well. And though it's a universal operating system, but then with the right functions written on it, you have an opportunity to interact with them. You are creating an operating system for you in blockchain itself. And it's also it's a decentralized, highly decentralized. There's no authority holding it, no one, no central player using it, maintaining it. It's just people bootstrapping this network individually, and uh, joining that network of computers to build this network. and that's true. That's truly a blockchain. And going back to Tim Berners-Lee thought on and how he envisioned web was primarily like this, and he envisioned it as a protocol, and he wanted it to be a decentralized open network where people can innovate and still have the trust uh, and security and all that available. So that was his vision, and blockchain is one of the areas it is really helping. So I wanted to touch upon um, how we can do this privacy applications. So how do you create one? And it deals with two parts to it. So one is a decentralized identity, and the second one is decentralized storage. So I will dive into both of these and how these two layers can help in building a privacy focused application. So if you see identities, so as I said, uh, we didn't have identity at all, and we were just using accounts. And but then we moved from that, and there were few intermediaries offering identities, like OpenID and so on. And the intermediaries were giving identities, and you own it, and then you authenticate it. And we are in an era today of decentralized identity. So what we mean by that is using any public blockchains today, you can anchor your identity publicly, and it is verifiable, it is trustable, and you truly own it. You have the keys for your identity. It's like owning the keys for your digital world. And all these blockchains, Bitcoin, Ethereum, or Sovereign, and even Stacks, which runs on top of Bitcoin, and it uses the same principle. It's about bootstrapping your identity, creating your identity on a public blockchain. So, and using that identity, how we can interact with it. So what happens here is how it works is it's very simple. Say you have a app, you have a wallet, and you hold your identity. And so your identity, your private keys gets created on your wallet, and then you have a key pair, and you publish the public key to the public blockchain. So what happens is you register yourself on the as a transaction. You'll post it on the public blockchain, and it gets verified. And the consensus comes in. It's added to the blockchain, and your identity is anchored on the blockchain. So now, if someone is building an app and they wanted to say this part, the institution or an app, and wants to authenticate you or verify you, say if you are trying to access the system, and you sign your identity and you send it to them, and the application builders or the institution or the authority can go to the public blockchain and look into the transactions and see if if it is you actually. So is this the right one? Or are you the right person to authenticate or not? So that is possible, and this is being built, and I'll show you how a few of the blockchains are helping you to validate that. And that's on the identity. So you really own it. The key what you have never leaves your wallet at all. It's on your user space, unless and until you lose the key, no one is going to take away those keys, and that is your keys to the digital world. And now coming to the storage now. So now you have your identity. So think of your account and the password, whatever you had to authenticate to an application, that has been taken away, and you were given a DID now. Now, when it comes to the storage now, so the data you produce with your account, and now you're going to produce data with your identity now. So the data storage is again a network where you can decentralize it. So today, if you see the blockchain layer, the main layer, and it maintains a state of transactions, and those transactions are primarily for transactional data. Wherever you wanted to communicate or wanted to arrive at a consensus with a community, or with a group of networks and nodes, then you go to the main chain. But then for privacy focused applications like anything we wanted to keep it private need not go on to the main chain at all. And there are decentralized storage networks which is going to help you with that. So you don't have to worry about scalability. You don't have to worry that your data is going to be public. It's because it's never going to be on the chain. It is going to be on the layer two. It's a layered architecture. So your identity comes from the blockchain. Now your storage is going to be on top of that. It's in another altogether a separate layer, and that's the storage network we will be using to store our data. And it's highly scalable, and eventually what is happening with all these storage platforms, or it's eventually a decentralized cloud. It's stack of all the decentralized cloud providers made decentralized, and all the data you are going to store on them is encrypted and stored, and you get your private storage there, and only you can access it. All your data is encrypted, and only you can decrypt and see it. So these platforms help you doing it. So Stacks blockchain does it. Filecoin, IPFS together, they also have interesting toolkits for developers to build it. And also storage is there, and you can also see a lot of storage connectors are available as well. You can have storage connectors helping you in doing that too. And you can also bring your own storage. Not necessarily we have to store it on these networks, but you can bring your storage as well. So using these storage connectors, you can configure it to store it on your own storage of choice. Could be your phone, could be your computer, could be any storage device of your choice, and that is possible as well. Yeah. And that's with decentralized storage network. And if you see a quick architecture of how it works, so each identity has a naming registration. So what happens is whenever you are trying to access an app, and that app is going to give you the storage, and it's configurable storage, and it's registered on the chain. So whenever a user is trying to access it, so you have your zone file, and the application will ask the zone file and find you which storage have you stored. So you get a personal space, and you're configured in a way that using your configuration, the applications can actually query the right storage and show you the data. And think of this as more like a database on the cloud, and the storage is there, and the facilitation of resolving these to the right destination, the routing is taken care by the blockchain system itself. And usually to facilitate that, there is a naming system usually comes into play, and then there is also a routing system. And here this is an architecture of blockstacks blockchain, and this helps in routing to the storage. And moving to the next one, I think then there are a set of applications. If you see here, BlockSurvey is one. I think it's running on top of BlockStack, and there are plenty of every traditionally what we have seen, every app what we are using. There is XOR Drive for Google Drive. There is communication platform. There is decentralized web hosting. Runcard is quite an interesting one. You can try it as well. And you can also go to app.co and app.com to see many of these apps which are getting built on top of these architecture. They primarily use decentralized identities and decentralized storage. And how to build is something that I want to walk you through. So Blockstack, it's helping you in providing the interface for building these apps. So Blockstack is one blockchain, but then there are plenty of other blockchains as well. There is where you can even build on Ethereum. You can build on Arweave is an interesting solution, and that's a beautiful blockchain. And even using Filecoin, you can build as well. So so Blockstack it provides the developer a toolkit. Eventually, it's programmable API. So for application developers uh, like me, I don't understand I don't have a solid foundation on networking or the fundamentals of or the core and the fundamentals of cryptography. And but blockchain kind of helps you in doing that. And Blockstack has made it programmable, and they are programmable toolkits which runs on top of. They have a virtual chain which is running on top of Bitcoin, and they are enabling blockchain to be programmable. And what I have done is I picked up this blockchain to build my app. So it's super simple. And it just kinds of isolates all this underlying things. So be it the DIDs, be it the storage, it's just a black box for developers to build on Web 3.0 or Society 3.0 or building a privacy focused application. We are using open protocols, open source softwares, and you are programming and building apps on top of blockchain. And if you wanted a full tutorial on how to build your own dApps, what we call it as dApps is decentralized apps. And in a channel, I have put out 2-hour videos. This is something that we've done it for an institute here, where in under 2 hours we help you to build your own Google Photos alternative, and with a focus on privacy. How you can create a private Google Photo uh, style app on your own. So it's quite super simple using Blockstack. And the key to building a privacy focused application, it's giving the identity as well as the data to the end users, and it's primarily giving them the ownership of their identity as well as their data. And those are the two fundamental key areas. And when we enable the identity as well as the data ownership, and when the users choose to play their play how they wanted to actually interact with their data, and that's when the applications really become privacy focused, and they don't have to have any trust issues at all. And it's just given to them that the app is private, and the application is private too. And with that, I'll conclude, and I would like to probably we can open it up for discussion, and I would like to hear your thoughts on it, and then we can share ideas.
Yeah, thank you, Wilson, for this interesting presentation. We have one question so far in the chat from Job. It's how come this solution is highly scalable, as most popular blockchains rely on proof of work, which is inherently not scalable. So,
yes, I think if you see, we are actually not creating our own blockchain, and we are always going to use the public blockchain. So, say for example, a Bitcoin, and if you see in the Bitcoin, I think the architecture of how a private app can be created is it's not storing the user's data on the chain. It's a layer two. You take the storage and store it on the cloud, and it's never going to be on the chain. And it's because we don't need a consensus for your data from anyone else on the chain. So all we are doing is your identity alone is anchored on the public blockchain. It's a one-time creation. When you create your account for the first time, or your identity for the first time, and then you are going to use that identity and then interact with the decentralized storage which is being built on layer 2. And it's super highly scalable. And if you have seen say be it the proof of work or even during the times of the 2017, where how plenty of dApps weren't able to scale on the Ethereum network. It's primarily because many of the uh, transactional data, as well as a lot of digital assets, were also stored on the main chain. I think that led to a lot of congestions because the sheer volume of transaction for personal data or ownership was also there.
Okay, thank you. We have another question or a remark from Robert. He says, I disagree that blockchains are automatically decentralized. We see that computing power, for example, in the Bitcoin case, is already unfairly distributed, and the very design of the system may anyway converge in such an unfair distribution. So how do you define decentralization?
Yeah, I think it's being talked over, and especially with Bitcoin network, I think it's at multiple levels of seeing centralization. So at the people level, it is decentralized, and now then on a level above, we would be looking at probably centralization with respect to the miners, how they are operating on the network, and then we go level above and then see maybe a state is trying to take over the network, or a country is trying to take over the network. I think so far it has sustained, and it's going to be interesting to watch how I think how do we define centralization there. Um, I haven't seen much of issues right now, but for identity, bootstrapping identity from a public blockchain, uh, we don't have to actually worry about someone rewriting the blockchain. Maybe there might be forks happening, but as long as the chain we are anchored on is going to be there for a longer time, our state is there, and I see we wouldn't see someone taking control of that state. I think that's my experience from the last few years, but happy to discuss.
I would like to open the floor for discussion also. So I see quite some comments coming, so just dare to speak. No problem. You can switch off the camera if you want and start discussing. If you feel like, otherwise Dave and I can just read the questions. But
no, I mean,
Robert, Job, and I also see Sander.
Yeah, I think mainstream. There's one question on starting by centralized services have failed in the past and are inherently inferior to decentralized design. Yes, I think the centralized services are primarily we see that the tech is getting centralized. I think the services what we see on the web is getting centralized. That's definitely an issue. It's because with even in back in India, I think when the Facebooks of the world or the Google of the world are trying to come in and partner with mobile operators and pushing their services, then there is absolutely no net neutrality at all. And I see that sheer power of such centralization it's threatening, and we definitely see having decentralized app, decentralizing all these powers, and giving rights to people to own their data will help in building a fairer web for everyone. I think that's something that I have experienced in India.
I agree to a certain level with you, because while excellent points are being made about computing power giving you some influence on the decentralized mechanism, I still think that even in a 51% attack situation, there's a huge difference between that situation and a fully centralized system, because there's still transparency, there's still visibility on what is happening, and there's still room to influence that, even though it might be hard. You do not have that in fully centralized systems. You're stuck to the one in power. So I see the risks of a decentralized system, but I still think that an influence decentralized system is still a different situation than a fully centralized system.
Got it. Yeah. I think That's absolutely right. I think so. With respect to the attack vectors or the transparency, uh, we see that the mainstream the blockchains. I think if you see, the decentralization is continuing to happen as well. So even if you take the Bitcoin and the biggest of the blockchains, maybe the top few of the blockchains, it's centralized. It's not centralized as what we have seen in the earlier days, but the attack. The cost to attack is it's immensely expensive, and they also say about the value in attacking. So taking over the network may not be the wisest of the choices right now. It's because you are trying to devalue that network what you are taking. That is one. And with respect to transparency on the centralized systems, it's enforced, or we are putting the trust back to the people, and that is where the problems usually arise. Uh, Irrespective of irrespective of whatever the services they are offering, could be from anyone, could be from a tech provider, or from a state or a government as well, for any of their digital products or and services what they are trying to put in front of the citizens, and it is definitely centralized, and could be social sovereignty identity, or and in India we have something called as Aadhaar, which is primarily a digital identity in India, and it's highly centralized. And they have the transparency, but then it's for some time, and eventually we will never know how your data is going to be used. And we have seen data breaches, leaks in such systems as well. Transparency is there, people's data is there, but then when you have people having a single point of failure, or being more vulnerable to doing something with all your data or the security, I see humans are more as a threat with respect all these issues, or what we are seeing on the web today, or the products and services what we're using on the web. So more of an internal attack. Internal threat is far greater than the external threat. That's what I see with the centralized services.
What about the responsibility that lies on the individuals? I mean, that goes in line with the question from Robert. Decentralization requires individuals to make individual choices. And I was also wondering, what about the responsibility for key management, for instance?
Yeah, I think the key recovery or the key management is it's something a lot of work is happening in this space. I think today you don't have to actually remember your private key as a string of hash, but you get something called as a 12-word passphrase, and using that you will recover you take your private key, and private key is usually never shown, and then you use that private key to authenticate, and it usually never leaves your space at all. It never leaves your user space. It's always on your own side, and it never leaves. I think a lot of innovation is coming. There are hardware wallets who can bootstrap identities like this on Bitcoin. So there are hardware wallets like Ledger. There is an interesting work going on in the blockchain called as Rider. Rider is a hardware wallet where you can actually own this identity using a hardware. You can use it, and you plug it to the system, and then you'll be able to even authenticate apps using your. It's something like a USB stick. Ledger is like a USB stick, but Rider is more designed like a watch, like an Apple Watch, kind of an interface where you will be able to authenticate using that. So I think a lot of work on the hardware side is happening. It's because that's where it's even more secure for maintaining your identities. So that is continuing to happen. And there's a lot of custodial services also coming up as well, I think, for all this, especially on the crypto asset space. But on the personal data space, there isn't any. But we might see when this picks up really well, and this is going to be a new norm, then we would see a lot of services coming in as well.
Yeah, so Robert has a couple of interesting points in the chat. One is decentralization requires individuals to make individual choices instead of trusting others. So don't you think that this is too complex for most people to manage their own fully decentralized services?
Not really. I think if you see with how the blockchain protocols are evolving or the development tool sets. As a developer, for me, it's really abstract and it's a black box. And the developing toolkits are so simple today. You can actually build a near closer to Web 2.0 experience. And sometimes someone who is going to come to the say if I have seen people who are just seen the Web 3.0 for the first time without having any computing experience at all, and they would be very comfortable with. I think it's more of a bias what we have right now, with always comfortable with the username and a password, resetting the password, and also asking the tech provider to help us with granting access and so on. I think that has been the Web 2.0 space, but then with the decentralized identity management, the auth is so simple. I think you can try a few of the apps on dap.com and app.go. You will see it's quite fairly simple, and the maturity is definitely going to come in. It's going to be even more super simple. Like with the hardware wallets, it will be even more interesting.
But the point is, of course, not the usability. It's about how can you determine if you can really trust the solution. I mean, take for example, Bitcoin. In a traditional bank, there's one party that manages your money. And you know there are oversights, you know there are auditors, so you can have some trust in that bank. And if you want to know more, there's ratings and independent organizations that rate banks. Yeah. If you go to blockchain, you have to research, am I on the right blockchain? Is this ledger trustworthy? Is this exchange trustworthy? And for most people, I think that is a stretch too far. And I think the same problems you will have in any decentralized solution. And especially if you talk about identity, how can you make people without or limited understanding of how computers operate, how they work, how can you make them do that validation?
Brilliant. I think it's if you see today also, take for example, simple application, say SSL security. People just simply trust it. They don't know what they just look for if there is an identifier or a signifier that your SSL is enabled or not, right? I think people trust with respect to the consensus which is getting built around us. So if everyone believes in say decentralized identity, which is bootstrapped on Bitcoin, and I think it's more of a general consensus which is getting built. And I see that's what it is. And these systems are open, verifiable, and there's absolutely it's transparent. You can look at the code, you can audit it, and if you take for example, what Keybase has done is it's interesting. I think they spent about $100,000 just on code audits. So I think though it is open source, but then they spent on code audits. I think it's kind of really open systems for people to verify, and the code is what is law, and I think that's what I feel it builds trust.
Yeah, okay, but another excellent point made by Robert. Don't you think that in this world there are things that you should not decentralize? For example, you would not decentralize healthcare. You would not decentralize the police. You want that centralized.
Yeah, I think certain
is identity the best fit for a decentralized system?
Absolutely. I think I think so. I was looking back to a few of the case studies as well. I think I've read about it, where eventually the data ownership, your identity as a digital identity. Today, do we have an identity to anchor ourselves on the digital world? Actually, we don't have today. But then all the digital data what we produce, I believe we should really own it. And even if someone is asking for our data, you have to consent to give your data. I think without our consent, it's more of a peer-to-peer interaction. And if it is, say, take in your example of healthcare, and if someone is requesting your data, you consent to share the data only with them. And all that is possible, and I see that should be the way to go, rather than putting the trust on our identity to be owned by a healthcare provider and so on. And that would be an interesting take on how we should look at data ownership. Like, you will own everything, and you have a choice to share with whom do you want to share, and the rights are with you. And we believe this is your digital right as well. And whom you share with, your data is purely yours. And that's why we also call it as own your data. And even if you see Microsoft's solution on decentralized identity, and they have something on, I think they're using Hyperledger, I guess, I think for building their own bootstrapping digital identities. And they mention about owning your identities. It's critical primarily with respect to helping you to own your data, which you can produce with your identity. And then the data will be interoperable, and you'll be able to choose to share with members who are available on the network, or to your peers. So I see it, everything has to come from the user space and then giving to someone. I think we should not have anyone delegating our data on our behalf. That's my take. I think I'm happy to listen from what do you think about it, Dave?
Personally, I think there are some parts of my personal data that I would not like to manage myself, and especially if you talk about healthcare. Asking or going to a system where I have to consent who sees my data, I think in the end introduces bigger risks than benefits for me. Especially in the case I need healthcare, there is of course a chance that I'm not able to consent anymore. What are they going to do? And why would I want to manage my healthcare data at all times myself? I mean, it's better. Yeah. I rather give that to my doctor and keep that safe and have some validations on that than keeping it myself and have the chance of losing it or not being able to give it to somebody, stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, see, this is the multi-party keys, like how we use on the PGP and so on. It's possible here as well. You can facilitate solutions like that. I think it's a kind of a group access or to your own trusted people. So that would be interesting. I think that's an interesting thing. I think you can delegate something like that.
Don't get me wrong. I'm all in on the idea on having control on who sees my data. And I think it's very bad that my data can be shared without any constraints. I just don't think that decentralization is by definition a solution to that kind of problem.
Got you. Yeah.
So let's take a look at the chat. I think we handled all the questions now.
I think so.
So if anybody has any more remarks or questions, feel free to do that.
Yeah, I think Robert has also mentioned on I think how people. I think there is also education which needs to be done. I think that's how people blindly many don't interact the way they choose to interact on the digital space. Unfortunately, I think could be handling their data, or I think it's recklessness is what I feel many a times, how people conduct themselves on the digital world, or lose their data. So I see it's continuing to happen. It's because I see the systems also. I think the responsibility of tech builders or protocol builders or also someone who's building applications, they have to consider all this as a platform also. Probably there's a lot of responsibility on platforms and also application developers to join together and actually build something which is just cohesive with respect to standing to these principles of just giving maybe it could be privacy, could be enabling people to trust on what they are using, and the experience should be just simple. Yeah.
Robert comes up with another question.
Yeah, I think something we get asked is BlockSurvey GDPR compliant. We are still evaluating. We are in a fix where I think so. What GDPR advocates is so one, we are not hosted in the European region, and we wouldn't qualify. The reason being is we are hosted again. It's not a decentralized hosting, and it's a centralized hosting. We choose a vendor and we host it. It's because the domain is centralized and it's not decentralized. And those are the areas which we will see decentralization will come in. Like there may not be a DNS, there might be a blockchain naming service, which is already being there. I think small pockets of work is already happening, and we are not hosted in Europe, and we are not GDPR compliant. And talking about two other areas, which is something which is a gray area to me as well. As a tech founder, I have very limited knowledge on privacy laws, but what we see is we are neither a data controller or a data processor. We kind of decentralized it. What we are downloading in BlockSurvey is it's primarily a set of code which is going to come and run on your browser. And the data collection, we have just one single API which is centralized. Otherwise, most of the 90% of the software it's running on your browser. So just for account management, payment gateway, and we use that. But we aren't able to still define who's the actual data controller and who's the data processor. Here, since BlockSurvey is using giving the ownership of the data ownership to the end users itself, they are actually controlling the data, and we have zero knowledge on the data. Without their keys, we can't even see the data, or we can't delete the data. It's because they actually own it. And with respect to data processor, the decentralized storage networks, what I mentioned, the set of storage networks, they are actually the data processor. That's where all the data is being stored, and we are just mere facilitators of enabling you to interact. You can see just like an interface for you to help you in doing collecting data and seeing data. That's just the piece of software which is running.
Yeah, and I think I agree with you. I mean, in that aspect, you are no different than, for example, Amazon being an IaaS provider. You can do all sorts of stuff with that, and some of that can be GDPR compliant, some of it cannot be GDPR compliant, but the role of Amazon in there is very limited. And I think that's the same for what you guys are doing.
Correct, yeah. And also you can think of, you can visualize something like, so remember the personal computing era where you install your software and run it on your machine. And that's what is happening here as well. And you have the app running at your side, and the data what you produce can be only accessed by you. So, and that facilitation it's in many folds. And when you bring your own storage to the product and then to the application, and then it becomes even more difficult to define who's the actual controller and the processors.
Yeah. I do think that it will raise a couple of very interesting legal discussions.
Yeah, I think happy to if you have some inputs for BlockSurvey. I think we get asked. I think we are yet to work, and in India, and there isn't. What we see is we are also working on the data protection bill has come in, and there are a few regulations coming in as well. So we were just watching this space, and it's more of building on top of what GDPR has done. I guess they are studying all the various privacy laws across the globe and inheriting the best of the properties and implementing here. So I have a question. Probably, what do you think about privacy laws? Today it exists in jurisdiction wise or state wise, and I was looking for maybe probably one unified law, which will not make us to be or make us to be a centralized provider. I think so. What is happening is maybe now Europe will mandate us to host it in Europe. It's because the service providers could be in Europe and so on. I think that could be for GDPR, but that will also counterplay with when if India asks us to host it in India. So not sure how we would be navigating that. So that's probably I would have multiple instances of services running to cater to people. So that's what I'm thinking. Yes,
Yeah, that is indeed happening already in China and Russia. So
yeah, I think it becomes a walled garden. That's what I feel. I think countries are becoming really close with respect to the networks and the services which is being provided. I think India has done it. I think we have banned about 20 plus Chinese apps and we can't use it. So it's interesting. Oh, that's nice. I think Robert clarified on the GDPR. He says we treat uh, if the country provides on the same level of data protection, we treat you like being in UAE. It's a good one. I'll check on that. And Robert also has made a point that this is true for decentralized apps, not building on top of common databases. I that is true. Okay.
in any case, in regarding the answer from Robert about the GDPR, it really will depend. If India is not considered an adequate country, we need to have some kind of mechanism. Now with the shrimps case, it's getting a bit complicated, but there's always possibilities indeed. So if you are treating the data so good as it's supposed to be treated.
And also, I think so. What we discussed is only on the application layer, or really at the software layer. But I think interesting work is going on in every layer of it, of enabling privacy. There are some interesting areas to look in this space. So I see true privacy comes in multiple layers. And though we are providing you privacy at the software layer, but think about your ISPs looking at what you are searching, or so they would know who is using BlockSurvey today. If you're opening BlockSurvey, it's because your ISP would have known you haven't had a location privacy. So those are the areas we will be looking at it as well. So when we wanted to really anonymize it, probably route over a TAR network where you can enable location privacy also. So if you wanted to do that, so what I focused on today is only the application privacy, that is core of your owning your identity, and we enable you data privacy, and that is one core thing. But then location privacy is even more critical. And when we get to see it, I think so we are also saying BlockSurvey doesn't have any trackers, analytics, and yeah, not much of anything. So there is plenty. Absolutely, we take zero knowledge from the platform. All we know is who is subscribing and who's unsubscribing. That's it. Who's registering with us. That's it. And what we are seeing is also with respect to anonymity, there is always a question of the ISPs or the network providers monitoring. Say, take for an employee survey and they wanted to be anonymous, but then if the network monitors are going to tell that who is answering at what time, and with respect to the request, which is the packets of data flowing through, so they can even trace that. So that level of privacy is still not there. So I see that could be possible only at the network layer. So there are some interesting solutions there as well to look at it in future. So could be interesting.
I think it's nice to see that you are aware of the possible problems regarding privacy and security, and you are working on solutions. You see the can see the potential, or within the privacy
Yeah.
community,
Pretty much.
we are a bit critical about the
Yeah, we have.
blockchain.
Yeah, I think so. We have seen. I think it has to be a balance. Definitely. If you see, BlockSurvey was fully decentralized initially. Then we have to bring in the checks and balances. So meaning, the app shouldn't um, become a root cause for evil, right? So what we have seen is, even with I can share this. What has happened is, with BlockSurvey, people used it to collect passwords. I think they are kind of using it to phishing, used like creating forms like Microsoft, and this is happening with any most of the platforms. Like even Typeform has faced this issue. Jotform, most of the form tools have been used for phishing. Primarily, they send it saying you have to reset your account, uh, give me your account and password, and they collect it. And with BlockSurvey, it was difficult. So what we have done is, we have a blacklist running, which is centralized. So I'm keeping the bad guys out. So it's not purely decentralized in that sense. It's because I have a responsibility. It's because I'm hosting it centrally, and it is centralized. All I'm enabling is only data privacy and your ownership of data. There it ends. But then, to keep the infrastructure really tight, really secure, I have to do these checks and balances, and it's a balance. And I see someone who is offering services like us on the decentralized space have to do all this management, and we can't shy away from it. It's because um, we don't want this to be misused as well. I think some responsibility is definitely needed. But then, if this is going to be self-hosted by someone, and if they still wanted to do it, they'll be able to do it. So we can't. That is out of our hands. It's because it's definitely not under our purview, and it's like using any software clone, and then you try to misuse it. I think those are the challenges which are continuing to be there, and I think we are also. This is another interesting thing where, when you provide, especially with tools like us, if you are collecting data from someone, um, who is the data principal, uh, who actually wants it. So if they ask you to give back the data, how would you give back the data? So I think those intricacies come into play. Uh, then, how would you share the proof of deletion? And those are the challenges. I think so. Today, tech providers probably can provide a proof saying that, okay, I have deleted it. But now, if the users are owning the data, and if there is another conflict, another user mentioning that I wanted my data back, uh, we're not sure how it will be. Now it will be the people's responsibility. So probably, I don't know how the laws will be coming in that space.
That is in any case a good preparation for the GDPR. So it's good you are looking into all those things.
Oh, that's nice. Okay, great.
Yes. Well, I don't see more questions. Nobody there to to speak. Well, to write at least, yes. Should we keep it here?
Thanks,
Okay.
Robert. I think Robert has some excellent questions. So, yeah, I think feel free to shoot me an email if there is anything. And if you think that I should read something more to it, would be glad to read it. If you could send something, especially around um, privacy laws, and and also how you're perceiving decentralization. It's because I think I see every demography has its own flavor to it with respect to their understanding of
Yes.
decentralization, or be it digital rights or privacy. And I see it's happening in India. I think every state has a different perception to how they should interact on the digital space. But happy
Yeah, we
to
have
learn
been still
from
careful
the side.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to thank you, Wilson, for bringing us and sharing with us your insights. And I have warned you already. We will be critical. In Europe, we find blockchain. Yeah, we are critical with the technology regarding
Not
privacy.
at all. I think it's a new space. It's it's just going into that space and seeing it. I think we are mostly explorers, and I would encourage you to take a look as well to see what are the potential opportunities out there. It could be interesting. So I'm sure there should be something for um, privacy practitioners, or also for the laws. Also, I see there could be some interesting things happening.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're not there yet. Stuff's not crystallized yet. It's an interesting field of research. So thank you for giving this presentation. I thought it was very nice. And thanks everybody for participating, especially all the questions. And hopefully we'll see you next time at our next meetup, which is at, Isabel, help me out.
The next time?
Yeah?
26th November.
26th November. Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Okay. I'll be there. I think I'll be glad to come as a community to learn together. So it should be.
Also at 7 o'clock. I will be posting a meetup. What is it about?
Sure, definitely.
Who is going to be doing it?
Thank you so much for inviting. I really enjoy meeting you all. So we'll stay in touch, and thank you.
Thanks, Wilson.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.